Oh, come in, come in. Hello. Oh, nice to see you again. Do come in. Close the door. And keep the warmth in on this rather drear February night. Have a seat. I've just got a pipe going and a warming drop of Lafroig. I thought on this visit I'd actually read to you a brief bit, pick it up here, from one of my own books. I really love the painting on the cover of this. It's by a great painter called Roger Wagner, sort of Reaping Angels. He's a kind of mystic painter, really, in the tradition of William Blake and Samuel Palmer. And in fact, I'm going to do a poetry reading with him in Oxford next Thursday, if you happen to be around and anywhere near Oxford. It's at St Andrew's Church. And I'm giving a lecture on William Blake the next day in my old college, Pembroke in Cambridge. But anyway, I wanted to read you a little passage in this book, which is a collection of my short essays that I write. I publish every week in the Church Times, called Poets' Corner. And I want to read this particular one to you because it tells you the story of one of these extraordinary serendipities that have clustered for me around the whole business of my embarking on, I think that'll be the last major work, as it were, which is my Merlin's Isle, our Arthuriad. I mean, all kinds of things, like Martin Shaw writing to me out of the middle of nowhere, saying he was reading it and asking he was hearing it on my channel and wanting to come and have me to come and speak to him. Or like when I was sitting in our local pub in a corner and there was some battered paperback books that people can sort of pick up and borrow or just there, and they're all the usual airport type books, bonkbusters, as they say. And suddenly I saw in between some of the shelves a volume of the Penguin Classics, which was the translation of the Caisse de Sangreal, which was one of the sources I was really looking for in the book. And I took it up to the landlady and asked if I could borrow it. And she said, "You can have it." It became a really important source book for me in writing the Caisse. So then, when I'm thinking about the whole poem sequence called Merlin's Isle, I'm thinking about Merlin. I go off, as I think, on a completely separate and nothing to do with this trip to Marlborough College, one of the great public schools, as we say, although they're really private schools in England. And then something happens which is completely tied in with the Arthuriad and the Merlin project. So I'll read you what that something was. And it's a little piece I wrote called Merlin's Barrow. I'll just wet my whistle. You do wet yours. Right, here we go. Merlin's Barrow. I had an extraordinary experience the other evening. I had gone down to stay in Marlborough for a few days to preach in the chapel and to give some lectures and seminars to the sixth formers of the college there. I arrived at dusk and was almost immediately whisked off to attend a school concert, which was excellent. As we walked back afterwards, with the long Victorian chapel on our left, I looked over to my right, peering through the gloaming, and it was as though some veil of time had been lifted and I was gazing into another age. Instead of the Victorian school buildings and dormitories I was expecting, I saw, rising before me, a great green hill, clearly an earthwork mound or barrow, perfectly shaped, with a glimmering white path spiralling up to its summit, and ancient yews clinging to its sides and around its crown. A little mist drifted by in the half-dark, and I felt that I could have been gazing on some corner of Middle-earth or some fairy mound. I half expected the fair folk to issue from that hill or to be present at the hosting of the Sidhe. "Am I seeing things?" I asked my host. "Ah," he said, "did you not know? That is Merlin's Barrow, the Merleberge, as they called Marlborough in the Doomsday Book. But of course it's much older than even Merlin. I'll tell you about it in the morning." he was as good as his word and better. For I not only learned the extraordinary history of the mound, as the school calls it, but was allowed to take the spiral path that encircles the mound 6 times before it reaches its summit. Historians, unsurprisingly, don't take the Merlin legend seriously, notwithstanding the town's motto, and this is just great, what a motto it is. It's the town's motto, Ubi nunc sapientis ossa Merlini. Where now are the bones of Merlin the wise? Well, here I suppose that's what the townsfolk are trying to tell you. But the history, setting the legend aside, the history is almost more remarkable than the legend. At first, it was assumed that the mound was simply the motte of a Norman castle that had once stood there, which would take it back to the 1100s, though it's far larger than any motte need have been. But some historians wondered whether it might be older still, whether it might have been there already before the Normans came. And then, just 10 years ago, came an astonishing discovery. Core samples were taken from right through the mound for carbon dating, and Merlin's Barrow was found to date from 2400 BC. It had stood there millennia before the age of Arthur and Merlin. It turns out to be a Neolithic monument contemporary with Stonehenge, and with its bigger sister 5 miles west along the Kennet at Silbury Hill, which is Europe's largest man-made prehistoric hill. As I climbed up the spiralling chalk path to the summit of the mound that morning, I could see a white horse carved on the flanks of the valley, and the sun glinting on the clear waters of the Kennet, the pure chalk stream that rises at Silbury and runs eastward towards the rising sun, down through Marlborough and past this mound. Even at this date, so remote from its making, I could sense in that magical alignment of earth, water, and the light of the sun, something of the numinous and sacred geometry marked out by our remote ancestors. Then I gazed from the mound across to the chapel, where I would be telling the story of how the light of life came to earth and revealed himself as the true source, offering us a fountain rising in us to eternal life. And I was glad to turn from one sacred place to another. Actually, rereading that, I mean, it is just as I said, I was about to go and, preach on the resurrection and the orientation of churches to the east along this valley, which is completely oriented east-west. So all that's there, but I reread it now and I think about the little thing I say about turning from one sacred place to another, about recognizing how this orientation towards the rising sun was significant for our ancestors, and then how, in a sense, the Christian gospel, as I understand it, makes sense of that orientation. And that's very much what I'm exploring in the Merlin's Isle book. What wisdom there already was, what was disclosed already, waiting to be fulfilled, as it were, in the ancient stories and legends and beliefs of these islands. So anyway, I am going to have, fairly soon in the arc of the storytelling, I'm going to have to give an account of Merlin's, well, we say burial, it's not really burial. Merlin goes with Nimue, whether knowingly or unknowingly, depends on your source, into a kind of sidereal place of enchantment, in a cave or a mound or a barrow or somewhere, where he's in a state of kind of suspended animation, waiting in a sense for the return of Arthur, and the idea is that Merlin might be roused as well, and that, of course, is the entire turning point of the plot of C.S. Lewis's novel, That Hideous Strength, where Merlin is located also in a college, but in under a wood called Bragden Wood. And I thought, shall I mention Bragden Wood? But the more I think about it, the more I'm inclined, since I must choose somewhere, and I want to have a sort of map of England in my mind as I write these stories. I think I might well choose the Merleberge of Marlborough, the Merlin's Mound, as the place where Nimue and the enchantress, where Merlin and the enchantress Nimue disappear from our mode of time and space into another one. So anyway, it's all to be thought through and composed, but It's nice to rekindle the memory of what was a very memorable visit. In fact, the schoolmaster who'd invited me turned up. You remember you called in on me in Martin Shaw's house the other week. The schoolmaster who'd invited me to Marlborough was there among the folk coming to hear Martin Shaw and me in Devon. So there are all kinds of threads of connection, which was wonderful. Anyway, thanks for dropping round, and every blessing. Sláinte.